stories.
Please don't kill me. I have a lot to live for. I have a wife and kids.
Back in 2015, I was working as a live-in home health aide for a wealthy family. It was just me and my patient living in a very nice condo in a quiet neighborhood on a golf course. We were the youngest people who lived there. I was 27 at the time. My patient was a 21-year-old male with Asperger's, SPD, and BPD, and some substance abuse problems. He had recently gotten into some trouble and been legally declared incompetent. Jake was a nice kid, but he had severe emotional issues and almost no social awareness, compounded by the refusal to take prescribed medication, which worked incredibly well when he took it, and drug abuse. He was taken advantage of a lot because of the crowd that he hung out around. Right before I moved in, 6 friends came to hang out with Jake one day and ended up staying for 2 weeks, draining Jake's bank account on various drugs: meth, coke, MDMA, marijuana, and absolutely trashing the condo. Jake was lonely and had never said no to people. He wanted them to like him. Honestly, I think Jake was 14 to 15 years old mentally. I think he turned to drugs to deal with depression and anxiety, and also to fit in with the people around him. He's much better now. It was a sweet gig. I was paid very well, lived in a nice condo, rent-free, and basically just had to keep our house clean, keep food in the refrigerator, and make sure he took his medication. When I moved in, my boss, Jake's mother, warned me about a girl who occasionally stayed with her father, who was our downstairs neighbor. She told me that the girl was named Amber and that she looked younger, but she was 37 years old, tall, blonde, and very thin. She was right. She looked much younger, like 25-ish. She said Amber didn't have a car or a job, and that she was an addict who liked to use Jake. Amber's father had custody of her 2 children, and she would come and visit the kids and stay for a few days a week. She said one day Amber asked to borrow Jake's car for an hour and ended up running off with it for 2 weeks. Amber was also the one who introduced Jake to the 6 friends who trashed the condo. She was bad news and was never to be allowed in the condo. She wanted me to call her immediately if Amber stopped by or Jake went anywhere with her. After the theft, she bought a GPS on Jake's car, and allegedly she could stop the engine. My boss made it clear that she didn't expect me to be a security guard, just to notify her of things that were going on leading up to this event. I had a few run-ins with this Amber bitch where I had to politely tell her that things like she was not allowed to come into the apartment. Jake could not take her to the store or anywhere. Jake couldn't go to a party at her boyfriend's house, etc. Amber was always spaced out, like she talked slow and seemed wide-eyed and off. She explained to me that she had been hit by a car while riding a bike recently and complained that she was the one who ended up going to jail. I was like, how? Apparently, she takes a lot of Xanax and was under the influence. So I think that explains the spaced out part. Anyway, she was never aggressive, but it was clear that she didn't like me and often would say things like, Jake is his own person. He's a 21-year-old man. He doesn't need permission. And whatever she spoke to Jake, she would be whispering to him, no doubt trying to manipulate him into giving her money or something. Anyway, on to the incident. Jake was out of state with his father, giving me a mini vacation. My best friend was staying over to spend a few days with me, and we were drinking PBR and watching RuPaul's Drug Race. It's like 11 p.m. and we hear a light knock at the door. I go investigate through the peephole and see it's Amber. I ignore her. She knocks louder. About 30 seconds later, I watch her leave through the peephole and sit back down, telling my friend the situation. 5 minutes go by, and she's back. This time, she is pounding on the door like a cop. I'm getting pissed off because I'm off of work, and I don't want to deal with her crazy ass, especially when my friend is over. So I say nothing and go back to the couch. She knocks like a normal person and starts saying, "Hello? Jake? Open the door. I need help. Hello?" I still don't answer. Then I hear her try to open the door. It's locked. Always. I am a habitual door locker. And this enrages her or something, and she starts screaming and pounding on the door nonstop. I get up and look through the peephole again, and she looks like a demon. Her pupils were huge, so I think she was on something. She looked crazed. Her hair was tangled and wild. She was sweaty and angry. Looking back, I'll never forget those wide pupils looking at me through an evil glare. I ask her through the door what she wants. She said she needs to speak to Jake right now. He owes her money, and she needs a ride to her boyfriend's house right now. I tell her Jake isn't home. She then asks me if I will take her. I tell her hell no. I have been drinking and I'm going to bed. She let out a frustrated scream, punched the door, and left. My friend and I went to bed shortly after. Didn't hear from her again after that. The next morning, we were getting ready to leave and go to breakfast. I hear a knock like a policeman's knock at the door. You know the sound. I look through the peephole expecting to see Amber, but this time, it's an actual cop. I open my door and can see my parking lot is full of police. There is a van marked crime scene unit and an ambulance. I honestly assumed Amber overdosed or something. The cop wants to ask me if I heard anything strange last night. I tell him about my encounter with Amber and ask if she is okay. He tells me she is in custody for murder of her father. Does Jake own a crossbow, and is it missing? Yes, and yes. It's been missing for weeks. The cop tells me that I need to speak to some detectives at the station. So I don't know if she came to my door before or after she murdered her father with a fucking crossbow, like she is Tyrion Lannister or something. But the detective told me that his theory was that she was a heroin addict and she was withdrawing and needed to get to her boyfriend's for some more dope. She tried to get Jake to drive her, and when that didn't work, she asked her father, who refused. This was what went down. They argued. Other neighbors heard that. She killed him with the stolen crossbow and stole his truck. She only got a mile away before she was signaled to pull over. She led the cops on a high-speed chase over the span of 2 counties before she finally lost control and crashed. The cops were only pulling her over on suspicion of drunk driving, but when they went to speak to her, she told them she was speeding because she needed to check on her dad. She thinks someone stabbed him. They asked her why she thought that, and she would not answer. They sent police for a welfare check and they found him before her sons did. So, that was the time my crazy drug addict neighbor murdered her father with my patient's crossbow. Let's not meet again. This happened about 10 years ago. I lived in a really nice 4-bedroom house with my friend, landlord Tim. We were working out in the country. Tim was at work, so I was at home alone. It was a really nice autumn day. Winter was ending, and we were getting into the sunny days, so I decided to leave the back door open. I meant spring, fuck, whatever. Can you stop being so hung up about the fact I got my seasons wrong? I was sitting in the TV room and heard commotion coming from the living room, dining room. Tim would often have random friends and family come over, so I assumed it was just someone from his life showing up. I smiled at this guy and asked how he was, and very quickly noticed he had rotten teeth and looked off. I then noticed about 4 police officers jumping over the back fence and running towards the house. I'm not sure what was going through my head at the time, but I headed towards the hallway. There were 3 doors in the hallway: the front door, a door to the garage, and a door to Tim's room. I briefly thought about going through the front door, but it was double bolted and I needed a key, so I went into the garage. At that point, I remember thinking, well, at least there are 2 exits. I put my body weight against the door as he tried to push through. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it felt so much longer. The cops banged on the door and I opened it. They shined their light in my face and asked me who he was. I explained I had no idea and I had never seen him. In this time frame, he went into Tim's room and locked himself in there. The police smashed the window and doused him with spray. The ambulance then removed him. The police told me later that he had been on a 3-day meth binge and threatened to stab his dad, which is why the cops were chasing him. Also, not really related, but the year before Tim lost his house in Black Saturday, this was his rebuilt house. Very bad luck. Back when I was 18 years old, I started working at a gas station. This was my first job. Near the end of my first shift, I was cleaning the hot dog rollers and a man walked in. He was rough looking, not in a bad way, but looked like he had been working outside all day. As soon as I set eyes on him, I got the gut feeling that I needed to stay away from him. Since I wasn't the one at the register, there was no reason for him to talk to me. However, the moment he saw me, he walked over and asked if I was new. I said yes, and he told me I was doing a good job and went on his way to check out. I noticed that he had a Jamaican accent, which is weird to hear since I lived in Michigan. Honestly, at that point, I thought that my gut was wrong about him, that I probably felt that way because I have bad social anxiety and had reached my limit of human interaction for the day. I was right the first time. During my next shift, he once again came in, and again I was cleaning. He came over to me and I still got the bad feeling in my gut. He asked me how my day was and I told him that it was okay. Then he looked at my hand. I was wearing my high school class ring. I like to wear my class ring on my left hand ring finger because I don't want to scuff it up while cleaning with my right hand. He asked me if I was married. I said no and told him it was my class ring. He then asked if I was dating and I lied and said yes. He started asking me questions about my boyfriend, like how old he was, did I want to marry him, and if we were in a physical relationship. I told him I wasn't comfortable answering that, and he got mad at me and dropped the conversation. He would continue to ask me questions about my love life every time he would come in. After about a month and a half of this, I noticed that he had come in every day that I was working. This was weird because the days and hours I worked changed from week to week. I asked my coworkers if he came in when I wasn't here, and they all said no. This honestly freaked me out, and I would start to have panic attacks every time that I would see him in his car pull up. One day, he tried to give me his phone number, and I politely told him that I wasn't interested in it. He got mad and was telling me that I needed to take it. My coworker at this point told him that he needed to leave. The next day, he came in and asked me on a date. When I declined and I told him no, he told me that I was going to regret it. He asked me several more times, and each time I said no. After a while of this happening, I told him that it was never going to happen, and that I had absolutely no interest in him and never would. This only made things worse. He told me that I didn't have a choice and that he would be here when I got off of work and that I was going to go out with him. When he left, I called my father and told him what had happened and asked my mom if she would come and pick me up at the end of my shift. She said yes. I didn't get off until midnight, and about 10 minutes before, my dad walked in and told me to act like I was going to my car as normal, but he was going to be in there. A few minutes later, the guy pulls in and gets out of his car and was just standing there. As my shift was over, I hurriedly walked to my car. He started approaching me, and I jumped into the passenger seat and slammed the door shut. When he got to my door, my dad rolled down the window and pointed his gun at him. The man ran off, and I thought that was the end of it since he didn't come back into my work the next few days. However, it wasn't about a week later I was at the store with my mom when I got the feeling that someone was following us, and sure enough, it was him. We got the fuck out of there as fast as we could, and from then on out, my mom and I was not allowed to leave without my dad. Everywhere I would go, he would show up. Even when I went to my friend's house, who lived about half an hour away from me, we caught him driving by the house several times. My mother had also caught him following her several times, which freaked her out. We contacted the police and told them what was happening, but they said that there wasn't anything that they could do about it and there wasn't enough evidence. He started coming back to my workplace, and I asked my boss to ban him from the store, but she said no. Later, I would find out that they were friends, and that this is how he always knew when I was working. I also believe that she was the one to give him my phone number, because it was around this time that I started receiving strange messages about how I looked, about my parents, and other creepy things. I got to the point where I was so paranoid that I wouldn't leave my house without my father. And when he was at work, I would carry a gun around with me. I had to have him drop me off and pick me up from work. And when I was at work, anytime I had seen a car that even somewhat looked like his, I would run and hide in the back room. Even my poor mother was paranoid and wouldn't go outside without someone with her. Finally, my father had enough and told me to quit my job, and that he would help me pay the few bills that I had. Even after quitting my job, I was freaked out and decided to go stay with my aunt and uncle, who are police officers, who live about 6 hours away from me. When I got there, it was the first time in nearly 6 months that I was able to relax. It didn't last for long. One night, my uncle and I went to pick up a pizza. Less than a minute after he walked in, the glass of my door was broken, and hands were gripping me. It was the Jamaican man and another guy. They got the door open and were pulling me out. I fought them as hard as I could. I got a few good hits on them, but it didn't do much good. Thankfully, my uncle came out. Both of them ran after my uncle announced who he was, but my uncle chased down the Jamaican man after I shouted which man he was. That day, he was arrested. I cried for hours straight from relief, anger, and stress. Later on, I found out that he was here illegally and was deported. It took me about 2 years before I could go anywhere by myself. Honestly, it wasn't until I got my CPL that I was comfortable going places without someone with me. I still get panic attacks from time to time because of seeing a car like his, and if I feel like someone is watching me. About 2 years ago, today, I recently moved to a new city in Canada. I was 21 at the time and single, as I just got out of a shitty relationship, so moving was a fresh start for me. In a new city, where nobody knew really, except my one guy friend, who we will call Mike. Mike didn't live directly in the city though, but we hung out a lot. Since I was single in a new city, I downloaded Tinder. Everyone my age has this dating app, or hookup app really. I don't usually do dating apps, but I was bored and was looking for a little fun. Remember the I don't do dating apps thing once you reach the end of this story. This is the exact reason I don't ever go on them anymore. So, I get on there and I match with a guy, who we will call Andrew. So I didn't message him first or anything, because I was doing a lot of swiping, and honestly went on with my day doing other things, as I just moved and needed to unpack. So a couple of hours later I check my phone, and I see Andrew has messaged me several times saying hi, complimenting me, and he even sent a funny pickup line. I always appreciate a good pickup line, as I have a good sense of humor about mostly everything, and don't take many things that seriously. Keep this in mind too. So I replied, and we got to chatting. He eventually asked for my number, so I gave it to him. It was fine from there, really. Nothing weird was said, so he asked me out to dinner and a few drinks. I agreed, and we met 3 days later. We met in a public place, obviously. I saw him outside the restaurant leaning on his car. It was a really nice car. He asked me to take a photo of it with the sun setting in the background. I said, okay, sure. Thought it was random, but whatever. We go inside and eat dinner and drink a little bit, and it was a really good date. So I invited him back to my apartment to keep the night going, I guess you could say. It wasn't super late, and we were really hitting it off. We get to my door, and I was a little bit tipsy as I drank 3 glasses of wine. I wasn't drunk, though, but I kept forgetting my code to my door. So I had it on my phone, and I got us in. The rest of the night wasn't weird at all. I woke up beside him the next morning, majorly hungover, and we obviously had fun the night before. He left, and all was good. I really didn't want to pursue anything further, so I texted him and said, last night was great, but I'm not looking for anything serious right now. And he freaked out on me, saying I was wrong for leading him on, and whatever else was said. Okay, fine, fair. You can have your opinions. That's by all means fine. So I ghosted him. Just didn't really feel like talking anymore after that. As he said degrading and subjective things, I left it at that and moved on with my life, as we all would. About a week goes by, and I'm out running errands to finish the last details of getting my apartment furnished. I come home, and he's sitting in my living room with flowers and a bottle of wine. I was drinking at dinner. I was immediately like, how did you get in here? As you need a key fob, and obviously a door code. The door code thing, after I thought about it, did not surprise me. He remembered it as I had it in and out in my open phone. But the key fob I was confused about, how he got the extra one I have. He admitted to taking it when I was asleep, when he stayed the night. I was really mad someone would do that after not knowing someone for like 16 hours in person, so I kicked him out. I was a little shooken up about the situation. I blocked his number immediately after he kept apologizing. I just couldn't forgive him after doing that and invading my home, which is a safe space. Fast forward again to 2 weeks later, I was on a little getaway in Seattle with my friend Mike. I posted Instagram stories on the trip, and I forgot until after he followed me. We matched on Tinder. This is a common thing guys my age do on Tinder. So he knew I was gone for a weekend. Mike and I are coming back to my place to drop bags off and chill for a little bit at the apartment. I walk into my apartment with Mike this time, and Andrew was on my couch with a girl. I was completely in shock he got in again. The girl even had the audacity to say, "Who are you and why are you in Andrew's apartment?" I lost my mind on both of them and asked him how in the fuck he got in again. He had no made-up story this time. He just flat out didn't know what to say except, "I didn't know when you'd be back, so I've been staying here with this bitch." Mike was mad as fuck about the situation as I told him all about it weeks ago. I demanded to know how he got into my apartment again. He said he made multiple copies of the key fob after he took it. My heart completely sank, and I threatened to call the cops if they did not get out of my apartment, and gave me every fob he copied. I was pissed and felt so invaded of my space. About a month goes by, and I was still thinking about it every once in a while. He was blocked on every social media I could find him on. I thought he was gone until I randomly saw him places. more and more frequently, like it wasn't a one-time thing. I saw him at least 7 times, and I was in public every single time. The last time, however, I was walking the seawall alone, and it was getting kinda late and dark out. It was about 9 p.m. in the beginning of June, and I stopped to tie my shoe, and when I stood up, he was right there. I fucking panicked because I genuinely felt threatened by him at this point. He kept asking why I ghosted him and didn't accept him coming around anymore, and how I could be so mean to someone who he was so into. He kept trying to grab my arm to talk to me and started yelling. I was in tears because his next moves I had no idea about. Someone thankfully heard and intervened. I told them I was not okay, and they called the cops. He obviously ran, and the police asked me to identify him. I gave them his name, and they couldn't find anyone with that name. So now it felt like me wondering if that was even his name. I remembered I had a picture of his license plate in my phone. He had a nice car and wanted me to take a picture of it with my phone as the sun was setting behind him. Douchey, I know. So I gave them that information, and they told me the plates weren't even registered. So now, I'm mind blown by the whole thing and very confused, even a little worried. They couldn't do a whole lot with what I provided, but they said they would update me if they find anything, and to contact them if he gets into my apartment again, or if I saw him out. I never did, thankfully, but to this day I'm always looking over my shoulder for that stalker. I have since then moved, and haven't seen him again, so to the guy who broke into my apartment on more than one occasion, let's not meet again. If you're new, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, as it really helps me out. And if you are already subscribed, welcome back and thank you for subscribing.